It's that motherfucking time. Welcome to day 60 of reading 30 minutes every single day for the rest of my life.
So you want to start a business.
The bear.
You might think you need a team of people.
I got YouTube running in the background for some reason. Just for no reason, actually. Yeah, we're at the top of page, we're at the top of page 191. Yeah. Let's get into it. I also got some tea, as you can see, right here. Let me take a sip. Damn, that's good. Alright. Let me get 30 minutes on the clock. And guys, Crimson Desert's coming out tomorrow, and I'm gonna play the shit out of it. Alright. 30 minutes starting now. In the end, there was more than 3 hours delay. Bob came back with the report that no horse or pony was to be got for love or money in the neighborhood, except one. Bill Fernie had one knight that he might possibly sell. A poor old calf-starved creature it is, said Bob, but he won't be part of it for less than thrice its worth, seeing how you're placed. Not if I knows Bill Fernie. Bill Fernie, said Frodo. Isn't there some trick? Wouldn't the beast bolt back to him with all of our stuff, or help in tracking us, or something? I wonder, said Strider, but I cannot imagine any animal running home to him. Once it got away, I fancy this is only an afterthought of kind Master Fernie's, just a way of increasing his profits from the affair. The chief danger is that the poor beast is probably at death's door, but there does not seem any choice. What does he want for it? Bill Fernie's price was 12 silver pennies, and that was indeed at least 3 times the pony's value in those parts. It proved to be bony, underfed, and dispirited animal, but it did not look like dying just yet. Mr. Butterbur paid for it himself and offered Mary another 18 pence or some compensation for the lost animals. He was an honest man, and well off as things were reckoned in Bree. But 30 silver pennies was a sore blow to him, and being cheated as Bill Fernie made it harder to bear. As a matter of fact, he came out on the right side in the end, as it turned out later that only one horse had been actually stolen. The others had been driven off, or had been bolted in terror, and were found wandering in different corners of the Bree land. Mary's ponies had escaped altogether, and eventually, having a good deal of sense, they made their way to the downs in search of Fatty Lumpkin. So they came under the care of Tom Bombadil for a while, and were well off. But when news of the events at Bree came to Tom's ears, he sent them to Mr. Butterbur, who thus got 5 good beasts at very well price. They'd had to work harder in Bree, but Bob treated them well. So on the whole, they were lucky. They missed a dark and dangerous journey, but they never came to Rivendell. However, in the meanwhile, for all Mr. Butterbur knew, his money was gone for good, or for bad, and he had other troubles. For there was a great commotion as soon as the remaining guests were astir and heard news of the raid on the inn. The southern travelers had lost several horses and blamed the innkeeper loudly, until it became known that one of their own number had also disappeared in the night. None other than Bill Fernie's squint-eyed companion. Suspicion fell at him at once. If you pick up the horse thief and bring him to my house, said Butterbur angrily, you ought to pay for all the damage yourself and not come shouting at me. Go ask Fernie where your hand some friend is. But it appeared that he was nobody's friend, and nobody could recollect when they had joined their party. After their breakfast, the hobbits had to repack and get together further supplies for the longer journey they were now expecting. It was close on 10 o'clock before they at last got off. By that time, the whole of Bree was buzzing with excitement. Frodo's vanishing trick, the appearance of the Black Horseman, the robbing of the stables in not least the news that Strider the Ranger had joined the mysterious hobbits, made such a tale as would last for many uneventful years. Most of the inhabitants of Bree and Staddle, and many even from Combe and Archeck, were crowded in the road to see the travelers start. The other guests in the inn were at the doors or hanging out in the windows. Strider had changed his mind, and he decided to leave Bree by the main road. Any attempt to set off across the country at once would only make matters worse. Half the inhabitants would follow them to see what they were up to and prevent them from trespassing. They said farewell to Nob and Bob and took leave of Mr. Butterbur with many thanks. "I hope we shall meet again some day, when things are merry once more," said Frodo. "I should like nothing better than to stay in your house in peace for a while. They tramped off, anxious and downhearted, under the eyes of the crowd. Not all the faces were friendly, nor all the words that were shouted, but Strider seemed to be held in awe by most of Breelanders, and those that he stared at shut their mouths and drew away. He walked in front of Frodo. Next came Merry and Pippin, and last Sam leading the pony, which was laden with as much of their baggage as they had the heart to give it. But already it looked less dejected, as if it approved of the change in its fortunes. Sam was chewing up an apple thoughtfully. He had a pocket full of them. He had a pocket full of them. A parting present from Nob and Bob. Apples for walking and a pipe for sitting, he said. But I reckon I'll miss both of them before long. The hobbits took no notice of the inquisitive heads that peeped out of the doors or popped over walls and fences as they passed. But as they drew near the further gate, Frodo saw a dark, ill-kept house behind a thick hedge, the last house in the village. In one of the windows he caught a glimpse of a sallow face with sly, slanting eyes, but it vanished at once. So that's where that southerner is hiding, he thought. He looks more than half like a goblin. Over the hedge another man was staring boldly. Boldly. Why is my hair so bad right now, guys? No one told me anything about how bad my hair was. Damn. Over the hedge another man was staring boldly. He had heavy black brows and dark, scornful eyes. His large mouth curled in a sneer. He was smoking a short black pipe. As they approached, he took it out of his mouth and spat. "Morning, Longshanks," he said. "Off early? Found some friends at last." Strider nodded but did not answer. "Morning, my little friends," he said to the others. "I suppose you know who you've taken up with. That stick at night Strider is, that is. Though I've heard other names not so pretty. Watch out tonight. And you, Sammy, don't go ill-treating my poor old pony." Pah! He spat again. Pah! Phew. Sam turned quickly. "And you, Fernie," he said, "put your ugly face out of sight, or it will get hurt." With a sudden flick, quick as lightning, an apple left his hand and hit Bill square on the nose. He ducked too late, and curses came from behind the hedge. "Waste of a good apple," said Sam regretfully, and strode on. At last, they left the village behind. The escort of children and stragglers had followed them, got tired, and turned back at the south gate. Passing through, they kept on along the road for some miles. It bent to the left, carving back into its eastward line as it rounded the feet of Bree Hill, and then it began to run swiftly downwards into wooded country. To their left, they could see some of the houses and hobbit holes of Staddle on the gentler southeastern slopes of the hill. Down in a deep hollow, away north of the road, there were wisps of rising smoke that showed where Combe lay. Archet was hidden in the trees beyond. After the road had run down some way, he had left Bree Hill standing tall and brown behind. They had came on a narrow track that led off towards the north. This is where we leave the open and take to cover," said Strider. Not a shortcut, I hope, said Pimpin. Our last shortcut through woods nearly ended in disaster. But you had not got me with you then, laughed Strider. My cuts, short or long, don't go wrong. He took a look up and down the road. Not one was in sight, and he led the way quickly down towards the wooded valley. His plan, as far as they could understand it without knowing the country, was to go towards Archet at first, but to bear right and pass it on the east, and then to steer as straight as he could over the wild lands to Withertop Hill. In that way they would, if all went well, cut off a great loop of the road, which further on bent southwards to avoid the Midgewater marshes. But, of course, they would have to pass through the marshes themselves, and Strider's description of them was not encouraging. However, in the meanwhile, walking was not unpleasant. Indeed, if it had not been for the disturbing events of the night before, they would have enjoyed this part of the journey better than any up to that time. The sun was shining, clear but not too hot. The woods in the valley were still leafy and full of color, and seemed peaceful and wholesome. Strider guided them confidently among the many crossing paths. Although left to themselves, they would soon have been at loss. He was taking a wandering course with many turns and doublings to put off any pursuit. Bill Ferny will have watched where we left the road, for certain, he said. Though I don't think he will follow us himself. He knows the land around here well enough, but he knows he is not a match for me in a wood. It is what he may tell others that I am afraid of. I don't suppose they are far away. If they think we have made for Archet, so much the better. Whether because of Strider's skill or for some other reason, they saw no sign and heard no sound of any other living thing all that day. Neither two-footed, except birds, nor four-footed, except one fox and a few squirrels. The next day they began to steer a steady course eastwards, and still all was quiet and peaceful. On the third day out from Bree, they came out of the Shetwood. The land had been falling steadily ever since they turned aside from the road. And they now entered a wide, flat expanse of country, much more difficult to manage. They were far beyond the borders of the Bree land, out of the pathless wilderness, and drawing near the Midgewater marshes. The ground now became damp, and in places boggy, and here and there they came upon pools, and wide stretches of reeds and rushes filled with warbling of little hidden birds. They had to pick their way carefully to keep both dry-footed and on their proper course. At first they made fair progress, but as they went on, their passage became slower and more dangerous. The marshes were bewildering and treacherous, and there was no permanent trail even for the rangers to find through their shifting quagmires. The flies began to torment them, and the air was so full of clouds of teeny midges that crept up in their sleeves and breeches and into their hair. I am being eaten alive, cried Pimpin. Midgewater, there are more midges than water. What do they live on that they can't get hobbit? When they can't get hobbit, asked Sam, scratching his neck. They spent a miserable day on this lonely and unpleasant country. Their camping place was damp, cold, and uncomfortable, and the biting insects would not let them sleep. There were also abominable creatures hunting the reeds and tussocks, that from the sound of them were evil relatives of the cricket. There were thousands of them, and they squeaked all around. Neek, breek, beak, neek. Unseeingly all the night until the hobbits were nearly frantic. The next day, the 4th, was little better, and the night almost as comfortless. Though the Neekerbreekers, as Sam called them, had been left behind, the midges still pursued them. As Frodo lay, tired but unable to close eyes, it seemed to him that far away there came a light in the eastern sky. It flashed and faded many times. It was not the dawn, for it was still some hours off. "What is the light?" he said to Strider, who had risen and was standing gazing into the night. "What is the light?" he said to Strider, who had risen up and was standing gazing ahead into the night. "I do not know," Strider answered. "It is too distant to make out. It is like lightning that leaps from the hilltops." Frodo lay down again, but for a long while he could still see the white flashes, and against them the tall, dark figure of Strider standing silent and watchful. At last he passed into uneasy sleep. They had not gone far on the 5th day where they left the last straggling pools and reed beds of the marshes behind them. The land before them began steadily to rise again. Away in the distant eastward they could now see a line of hills. The highest of them was at the night of the line and a little separated from the others. It had a conical top, slightly flattened at the summit. "That is Weathertop," said Strider. "The old road, which we have left far away on our right, runs to the south of it, passes not far from its foot. We might reach it by noon tomorrow if we go straight towards it. I suppose we had better do so." "What do you mean?" asked Frodo. I mean, when we do get there, it is not certain what we shall find. It is close to the road." "But surely we're hoping to find Gandalf there." "Yes, but the hope is faint. If he comes this way at all, he may not pass through Bree, and so he may not know what we are doing. And anyway, unless by luck we arrive almost together, we shall miss one another. It will not be safe for us to wait there long. If the riders fail to find us in the wilderness, they are likely to make for Weathertop themselves. It commands a wide view all around. Indeed, there are many birds and beasts in this country that could see us as we stand here from that hilltop. Not all birds are to be trusted, and there are other spies more evil than they are." The hobbits looked anxiously at the distant hills. Sam looked up into the pale sky, fearing to see hawks or eagles hovering over them with brightly unfriendly eyes. "You do not make me feel uncomfortable and lonesome, Strider," he said. "You do make me feel uncomfortable and lonesome, Strider," he said. What do you advise us to do?" asked Frodo. Let me take some tea. "What do you advise us to do?" asked Frodo. "I think," answered Strider slowly, as if he was not quite sure. "I think the best thing is to go as straight eastward from here as we can, to make it for the line of hills, not for Weathertop. There we can strike a path I know that runs at their feet. It will bring us to Weathertop from the north and less openly. Then we shall see what we shall see." All right, tea break. Bro, this shit's so good. Like, I added perfect everything to it. All right. All that day they plodded along until the cold and early evening came down. The land became drier and more barren, but mist and vapors lay behind them on the marshes. A few melancholy birds were pimping and wailing until the round red sun sank slowly into the western shadows. Then an empty silence fell. The hobbits thought of the soft light of sunset glancing through the cheerful windows of Bag End far away. At the day's end, they came to a stream that wandered down from the hills to lose itself in the stagnant marshland, and they went up. Bro, what is on my fingers, bro? What? And they went along its banks while the light lasted. It was already night when at last they halted and made their camp under some stunted alder trees by the shores of the stream. Ahead there loomed now against the dusky sky the bleak and treeless backs of the hills. That night they set a watch, and Strider, it seemed, did not sleep at all. The moon was waxing, and in early night hours a cold gray light lay on the land. Next morning they set out again after sunrise. There was a frost in the air, and the sky was a pale, clear blue. The hobbits felt refreshed as if they had had a night of unbroken sleep. Already they were getting used to much walking on short commons, shorter at any rate than what in the Shire they would have thought barely enough to keep them on their legs. Pippin declared that Frodo was looking twice the hobbit that he had been. "Very odd," said Frodo, tightening his belt, "considering that there's actually a good deal less of me. I hope the thinning process will not go on indefinitely, or I shall become a wrath." "Do not speak of such things," said Strider quickly, and with surprising earnestness. The hills drew nearer. They made an undulating ridge, often rising almost to 1,000 feet, and here and there falling again low clefts or passes leading into the eastern land beyond. Along the crest of the ridge, the hobbits could see what looked to be the remains of green-grown walls and dikes. In the clefts there stood the ruins of old works of stone. By night they had reached the feet of the western slopes, and there they camped. It was the night of the 5th of October, and they were still 6 days out from Bree. In the morning they found, for the first time since they had left the Chetwood, a track plain to see. They turned right and followed it southwards. It ran cunningly, taking a line that seemed chosen so as to keep as much hidden as possible from the view, both of the hilltops above and the flats to the west. It dived into dells and hugged steep banks, and where it passed over flatter and more open ground on either side of it were lines of large boulders and headstones that screened the travelers almost like a hedge. "I wonder who made this path and what for," said Merry, as they walked along one of these avenues where the stones were unusually large and closely set. "I am not sure that I like it. It has rather a Barrow-waitish look. Is there any Barrow on Weathertop?" "No, there is no Barrow on Weathertop nor any of these hills," answered Strider. "The men of the West do not live here, though in their later days they defended the hills for a while against the evil that came out of Agmar. This path was made to serve the forts along the walls, but long before, in the first days of the North Kingdom, they built a great watchtower on Weathertop. Amon Sul they called it. It was burned and broken, and nothing remained of it now but a tumbled ring, like a rough crown on the old hill's head. Yet once it was tall and fair. It is told that Elendil stood there watching for the coming of Gil-galad of the West in the days of the last alliance." The hobbits gazed at Strider. It seemed that he learned an old lore as well as in the ways of the wild. "Who was Gil-galad?" asked Merry, but Strider did not answer, and seemed to be lost in thought. Suddenly a low voice murmured, "Gilag was an elven king. Of him the harpers sadly sing, the last whose realm was fair and free between the mountains and the sea." The others turned in amazement, for the voice was of Sam's. "Don't stop," said Merry. "That's all I know," stammered Sam, blushing. "I learned it from Mr. Bilbo when I was a lad. He used to tell me tales like that, knowing how I was always one for hearing about elves. It was Mr. Bilbo as taught me my letters. He was mighty book-learned, was dear old Mr. Bilbo, and he wrote poetry. He wrote what I have just said. He did not make it up," said Strider. "It is a part of the lay that is called the Fall of Gil-galad, which is an ancient tongue. Bilbo must have translated it. I never knew that." There was a lot more," said Sam. "All about Mordor. I didn't learn that part. It gave me the shivers. I never thought I should be going that way myself." "Going to Mordor?" cried Pippin. "I hope it won't come to that." "Do not speak that name so loudly, Strider," said Strider. It was already midday when they drew near the southern end of the path, and saw before them a pale clear light of the October sun, a great green bank leading up to the bridge on the northward slope of the hill. They decided to make for the top at once, while the daylight was broad. Concealment was no longer possible, and they could only hope that no enemy or spy was observing them. Nothing was to be seen moving on the hill. If Gandalf was anywhere about, there was no sign of him. On the western flank of Weathertop, they found a sheltered hollow, at the bottom of which there was a bowl-shaped dell with grassy sides, and then they left Sam and Pippin with the pony and their packs and luggage. The other three went on. After half an hour's plodding, Strider reached the crown of the hill. Frodo and Merry followed, tired and breathless. The last slope had been steep and rocky. On the top they found, as Strider had said, a wide ring of ancient stonework, now crumbling over, covered with age-long grass. But in the center of a cairn of broken stones had been piled. They were blackened as if with fire. About them the turf was burned to the roots, and all within the fire and the ring was scorched and shriveled, as if the flames had swept the hilltop, but there was no sign of any living thing. Standing upon the rim of the ruined circle, they saw all around below them a wide prospect of the most parts of land empty and featureless, except for patches of woodland away from the south, beyond which they caught there and there the glint of distant water. Beneath them, on the southern side, there ran a ribbon, the old road, coming out of the west and winding up the down, until it faded behind a ridge of dark land to the east. Nothing was moving on it. Following its line eastward with their eyes, they saw the mountains. The near foothills were blown and somber. Behind them stood taller shapes of gray, and behind those again were high and white peaks of glimmering among the clouds. "Well, here we are," said Mary, and very cheerless and uninviting it looks. "There is no water, no shelter, no sign of Gandalf. But I don't blame him for not waiting if he ever came here. "I wonder," said Strider, looking round thoughtfully. "Even if he was a day or two behind us at Bree, he could have arrived here first. He can ride very swiftly when need presses." Suddenly he stooped and looked at the stone on the top of the cairn. It was flatter than the others, and wider, as if it had escaped the fire. He picked it up and examined it, turning it in his fingers. "This had been handled recently," he said. "What do you think of these marks?" On the flat underside, Frodo saw some scratches. "There seemed to be a stroke or dot and 3 more strokes," he said. "The stroke on the left might be a G-ruin with thin branches," said Strider. "It might be a sign left by Gandalf, though one cannot be sure. The scratches are fine and they certainly look fresh, but the marks might mean something quite different, and have nothing to do with us. Rangers use ruins, and they have come here sometimes." "What could they mean, even if Gandalf made them?" asked Mary. "I should say," answered Strider, "that they stood for G3, which were a sign that Gandalf was here on October the 3rd. That is 3 days ago now. I would also know that he was in a hurry and danger at hand, so that he had no time or did not dare to write anything longer or plainer. If that is so, we must be wary. I wish we could feel sure that he made the marks, whatever they may mean," said Frodo. "It would be a great comfort to know that he was on the way, in front of us or behind us." "Perhaps," said Strider. "For myself, I believe that he was here and was in danger. There have been scorching flames here. There have been scorching flames here, and now the light we saw 3 nights ago in the eastern sky comes back to mind. I guess that he attacked on this hilltop, but with what result I cannot tell. He is here no longer, and we must now look after ourselves and make our own way to Rivendell as we best can." "How far is Rivendell?" asked Mary, gazing round wearily. The world looked wild and wide from Weathertop. "I don't know if the road has ever been measured in miles beyond the Forsaken Inn. A day's journey east of Bree," answered Strider. Some say it is far, and some say otherwise. It is a strange road, and folk are glad to reach their journey's end, whether the time is long or short. But I know how long it would take me on my own feet, with fair weather and no ill fortune, 12 days from here to that ford of Bruinen, where the road crosses the Loudwater that runs out of Rivendell. We have at least a fortnight's journey before us, for I do not think we shall be able to use the road." "A fortnight," said Frodo. "A lot may happen in that time." "It may," said Strider. They stood for a while silent on the hilltop, near its southwater edge. In that lonely place, Frodo, for the first time, fully realized his homelessness and danger. Get some of this tea. He stared down at the hateful road leading back westward to his home. Suddenly, he was aware that 2 black pecks were slowly moving along it, going westward, and looking again, he saw that 3 others were creeping eastward to meet them. He gave a cry and clutched Strider's arm. "Look!" he said, pointing downwards. At once, Strider flung himself on the ground behind the ruined circle, pulling Frodo down beside him. Merry threw himself alongside. "What is it?" he whispered. "I do not know, but I fear the worst," answered Strider. Slowly they crawled up to the edge of the ring again and peered through a cleft between 2 jagged stones. The light was no longer bright, for the clear morning had faded, and clouds creeping out of the east had now overtaken the sun. As it began to go down, they could all see the black specks, but neither Frodo nor Merry could make out their shapes for certain. Yet something told them that there, far below, were black riders assembling on the road beyond the foot of the hill. "Yes," said Strider, whose keener sight left him in no doubt. "The enemy is here!" Hastily they crept away and slipped down the north side of the hill to find their companions. Sam and Peregrine had not been idle. They had been... Oh my god.
This motherfucker, they can't stop you on a fucking Tuesday. How they gonna stop you? How the fuck are they gonna stop?
That was day 60 of reading every single day for 30 minutes for the rest of my life. Shit was getting real. Isaiah. We're at the top of page 200. That was day 60. See y'all on day 61. Let's go! 2 months.